You've been searching for the best way to generate passive income in your life and heard that real estate is a great way to do it. But you're tired of all the so-called gurus who are all talk and no substance. Get ready to celebrate because Kevin Buck has spent 14 years successfully making it happen. This is the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Now, here's Kevin Buck.
Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income-producing real estate investments. Now, our guests for this week's show are Sherri and Frank Candelario. Now, Sherri and Frank are the founders and visionaries behind Kate's House Foundation, which they founded back in 2016. And Kate's House Foundation is the first nationally accredited sober living homes in Washington state. Kate's houses were the first accredited homes to have medically approved treatments for co-occurring disorders of mental health and substance use disorder. Now, with their business model and incredibly high demand and doing quite well, they are now expanding their operations to sunny Florida. In fact, I just found out that they are right down the road from me here in the Tampa Bay area. So excited to, again, have this conversation and learn about, what their plans are here in Florida as well. And, after Sherri and Frank they've spent the last couple of years building their own business, but also helping hundreds of other folks along the way, they began teaching others in the U.S. how to build their very own portfolio of single-family homes. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Frank and Sherri to the show. Guys, how you doing today?
Great, Kevin.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank
yes.
you.
And again, welcome to Florida. Welcome to Tampa Bay. It's beautiful. I love this area. Like I told you before we started recording, you'd have to take me out kicking and screaming to get me anywhere else in the country. If I could get rid of the mosquitoes and maybe some of the humidity, I'm okay with the humidity. More than the mosquitoes, I would say that it would be the absolute perfect place in the world to live. So, but it's pretty darn close to perfect in my opinion.
Well, we're coming from Seattle, Washington, so it's the first sunshine we've seen since last August.
Oh, gosh.
Weather-wise, the bar is low. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, welcome and excited to have you here today. And what I'd like to do, guys, is maybe start off by having you take the mic and tell our listeners a little bit more about yourselves, your backgrounds, and ultimately how you found your way into this area of real estate.
Mm-hmm. So Frank and I started working together in 2015 in the area of real estate. By background, I'm a biotech scientist, and Frank's in international marketing. We had the experience with my teen daughter with addiction. I had adopted her from Russia when she was 6. She had a great life, but when she was 12, she went down that rabbit hole and really deteriorated over the years. And I soon found out that 50 to 80% of families know somebody who's struggling with addiction. In fact, even in the last month, 32 million children over the age of 12 were using some sort of illicit drugs, but I didn't know that at the time. And so like a mom with experience in this area, I started taking her to recovery hospitals, doing everything people told us to do. But the follow-up for any type of recovery program is to live in community in a sober home for at least 30 days, up to 2 years. And what I found is Kate was repeatedly asked to leave. And for me, the reasons just seemed irrational, for not doing chores, for being late. And the worst one was for relapse. They would put her out in 15 minutes. It just seemed so very, very wrong.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Sherri and I it was at a time where Sherri and I were really interested in getting involved in investing in real estate. And, we took some classes and we learned a few things and they weren't that appealing to us. But something happened to Kate, that young girl. We had bought a house and second home in San Diego area, and we found a woman who actually housed people in recovery. But her house was so different than we were used to. Her house was actually in a very nice, safe neighborhood. And it was a beautiful home, and it was furnished beautifully. And all of a sudden, because what we learned from Kate is sometimes parts of town, and what was right outside her door in some of those recovery houses wasn't conducive to maintaining sobriety. So anyway, Kate cleaned up. She cleaned up in 90 days. And so it was the same time we were thinking about investing in real estate in Seattle. And we said, guess what? Let's take that model, improve on it, and we can do better and we can make a difference.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And outside of the home in San Diego being located in a better neighborhood, better furnished, what are some of the other things that they did differently, that woman did differently with her operations that you just didn't find, that wasn't the norm with some of the other recovery facilities that she had been in?
Well, Kate had never lasted more than a week or two in any home she'd gone to. That's why we went through so many. But when Kate had mishaps or failures, they hung on to her. And that's when we realized it's this housing insecurity, this feeling that I'm disposable, had to be removed. People who are in addiction have self-loathing anyway. They don't feel like they can break that cycle. But if somebody says, hey, you're worthy, I'm going to hang on to you, I'm not going to let you go. And we took that model to Seattle. In fact, like any new real estate investors, we went to a home that needed a lot of work and we started hitting it with our own sledgehammers. We said, we can do this. And it took a long time, but we got better and better and better at it. In fact, when we opened our first home, we were housing veteran women from Iraq and Afghanistan. But we were approached by the Department of Corrections in Washington, and we had no idea, but there's billions of dollars of funding to house people from early release from prison. And these are model people who've been working, they're on work release. And they said, would you take some of our women? And we said, who are your women? And they said, young moms who had felony drug issues. And we said, well, that's right in our wheelhouse. Let's figure that out. And the first women we had were the Golden Girls. I mean, they were women in their 50s who had been incarcerated for Percocet addiction, and the crimes that they had committed were, a bad check or picking something up out of a store. But, these 20% of people who are incarcerated today are for drug-related felonies, something they did under the influence. And we weren't even sure how we were going to do this. In fact, we said, this is our first go-round with a clean and sober home. And they said, let us help you write the rules. And, we said, you're kidding. They said, yeah. And so we did. We worked together. And within a couple of weeks, they said, your house is so great, because it was beautifully furnished. It was on a bus line, single family home. We put 2 people per bedroom. So that gave us double cash flow. And that really was what intrigued us the most, is when the transitional housing specialist for Department of Corrections approached us. He said, put 10 people in this house. I'm fine with that. And we said, okay. And he said, and by the way, this is back 6 years ago, I'll give you $500 a person for 3 months. And Frank and I, who have just spent 6 months remodeling a home with our own sledgehammers and our own hard money loan, looked at each other and said, we'll do it. We're fine with that.
Yeah. And wow. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, and then the next thing we knew, they said, we have friends who would be great. And so their friends, we went from 3 to 18 in 6 months. Well, Seattle's market in 2015 is as hot as it is today. Mm-hmm. And we bought 3 homes in 6 months. They're all worth a lot of money today. And every mortgage payment has been paid for by voucher money, by federal money, by grant money. And then we branched off into men. And we kept buying more homes because we had more people who wanted to come.
Very interesting. And, that home, the very first home, we'll use that as the foundation. 10 folks could be in that home at any one given time, $500 a month. What would that have normally rented for if you were to just rent it to the typical family that would have occupied that single family residence?
Well, let's put it this way. After the rehab, which cost a lot of money, more than it could have, because we were newbies at it, it would have been a small, probably $1,600.
Oh, that's it.
Just a small cash flow. And, that's only one water heater break or, calling the plumber a couple times. What we realized quickly is that, because we had taken classes on, climbing a telephone pole and putting signs, we buy ugly houses, and doing a lot of other ways to get stuff. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted to own beautiful property. But to own beautiful property, we had to get a much higher cash flow. So ironically, all these things meshed at one time to where if you lease by the bed for a clean and sober program, you can get tremendous 2 or 3 times the normal cash flow from a husband. Because our goal is not to rent to a husband, wife, 2 kids, and a dog. Our goal is to have a home that, if necessary, we could sell to a husband, wife, 2 kids, and a dog. Mm-hmm. But, our business model created great cash flow that enabled us just to keep growing.
And at that rent money, the cash flow would have been $200 a month.
Got it. Okay. I was going to ask, that $1,600 a month, is that what you would have cash flowed each month, like net, or was that actually what you would have rented,
That was the gross. Yeah, it was the gross. Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. So 10 folks there, I'm assuming there's some attrition. There's, there's turnover with those individuals. With the folks that you've been serving, have you found that there's a fair amount of consistency with when a bed's going to come available, another person's waiting in line to get in?
Well, as time went on, we wrote rules for living in community. In fact, our second biggest rule was everybody would live in Zen and tranquility together, which is a highly unusual rule for this type of housing. So we were attracting really good people. And right now we have contracts with our county that will pay us by the bed, whether it's filled or not. Wow. And they're sending people for 2 to 3 years at a time. Oh, wow. And if one of their people, isn't making it, in their opinion, even if the bed's not filled, they'll continue to pay for the bed and they'll replace as needed. So what we did is we found that by creating a superior program and superior supports in great houses and great neighborhoods, that the people with the funding came to us.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So it's a guaranteed payment, whether that person's there or not. It's a guaranteed payment. Very, very interesting. Talk to me about the actual day-to-day operations, what that looks like. Is there a staff member there? Who oversees the folks that are living in these homes? Is that your responsibility, or is that part of the program where the county or local, municipality gets involved in overseeing those folks?
It's kind of a partnership because many of the people who come to us are under supervision.
So like they have a case manager, their own house.
Yes. So they contribute a lot. But the other thing is we hire from within. The thing is, if you're inside prison and you work really hard to do well, you get rewarded with early release. And if you do good with work release, then you get early release, saving the state $79,000 a year. But who do you release to? So a lot of these people are used to kind of being in parts of living situations that aren't really helpful in recovery. So all of a sudden they come to our house. They're in a very safe neighborhood. We have a good neighbor policy. All our neighbors love us. Our yards are the nicest in the neighborhood. And so they're grateful. So what we do is we have a lot of grateful people who live in our houses. And it's not hard to find one who's got a little more leadership, a little more dedication to the house, a little more commitment to everybody succeeding. And so we hire them as a house manager.
And all we do is we just decrease their room payment a couple $100 a month. Mm-hmm. And they want that on their resume. It makes them look good. So when we first started, we just had a house manager and they would text us if something went awry. But usually what went awry was, we may have a plumbing leak or something like that. But really people are self-managed. Now at this point, we're so big, we have 50 people and we're 3,000 miles away. Mm-hmm. So we have one person who is doing operations and he's mowing all the lawns and doing all the maintenance and fixing. And he had come to us and lived with us for 4 years. And the stipend we're paying him is very minimal. And we also have a woman who's had lived with us too. So there's kind of a loyalty factor. And she's working with the house managers. So we hear very little, except the accolades that things are going well.
Got it. Very interesting. And so, I know that you've helped and you've served many different group sets. And how do you determine? Well, I guess maybe not how you, because I know that the local government agencies that you worked with ultimately had come to you, right, saying, "Hey, Sherri and Frank, we need help here, we need help there." But coming to a new market, right? Like, so you just moved to Florida.
Yeah.
How will you go about, or how have you gone about determining the demand for the various group sets that are really in need of a clean, safe, and quiet place to either recover in or to live? I know there's different group sets. Right. We're ultimately talking about those that are in search of recovery for the most part. Either drug recovery or they're getting out of the system, early work release, and they need some type of transitional housing. But there's other group sets as well that that I know you guys teach and you talk about serving. But I guess back to the original question is, how does one determine what the overall demand is for these types of arrangements in their local area?
Well, our friend Google, I was on the internet yesterday and I found out that, there were some homes. One of the things to share is Congress has deemed that sober homes, because they're putting $50 billion a year towards recovery and monitoring addiction. I mean, this is the first time lifespans have decreased. And Congress is deeming that states have accredited sober homes to get state and local funding and federal funding. And so Florida is a state that requires accreditation. So I went on Google and I found some accredited homes that told us there's a demand. And so we're going to come in and we're going to do better. One of the things we've done is we've driven by other folks' homes, determine where they are. In fact, I think our second home we put 2 blocks away from somebody else's home, and we filled it up. There's no lack of need. One of the greatest needs we've had over the last years since the pandemic is veterans. A lot of Vietnam vets are finding that it's difficult to live independently, and they're not quite ready for assisted living, but they're very happy to live in community with some younger folks and kind of have that communal living. And they like the idea of a sober home because it's quiet and it's peaceful and there's rules in place. Mm-hmm. So really, it's just looking at what is the demand, and there is a demand. There's significant demand. And, I think the first thing, and that's one of the things Frank and I have specialized in, is teaching accreditation standards for these homes, because it is a wave that's sweeping the country. And now 35 states require sober homes have national certification to get these people from incarceration, the veterans.
Right, and I love what's going on because everything is changing. Because when we got into business, recovery houses is like the industry is like the wild, wild west. Anyone can have one. But politicians and community leaders are realizing that if you put national standards in these homes and they pass, and you are in the right neighborhoods with the right surroundings, the success rate is dramatically higher. And so all of a sudden, once an officer realizes that if I put them in Frank and Sherri's house, my success rate with my people I'm taking care of is dramatically higher. So really, to me, I was in branding for 34 years. It's a branding issue. Mm-hmm. We want good results, and we do everything. And even though we have leaders who will keep an eye on our houses, we love to rotate through the houses because we actually adore many of these people. They're just hardworking people who just need a good chance. We love watching mothers get, back with their children. We love people seeing them get off supervision and graduating from drug court. It's actually a real positive, fun, enjoyable thing.
And once you have the accreditation, that's when the contracts come. I mean, that was a requirement for us to get a substantial contract from King County Drug Court. So drug courts are in every county in the nation, and many of them will pay to house people during the 2-year period that people are in drug court. And what drug court is somebody has an infraction, and if they follow all the parameters for 2 years, their records are expunged. So they're never incarcerated.
And what is that accreditation process? What are the expectations, or what's that bar look like?
Well, the bar, once you've done it, is doable. Mm-hmm. And there's different requirements for each state, but basically it's, the safety of the house, and it doesn't require sprinkler systems or anything extra, but the safety of the house, where the house is located. And then there's a set of rules that the homeowner is expected to follow. And the first one is how they handle money, because that is an area that people who have had housing insecurity sometimes have been taken advantage of. So, fiduciary responsibility, good neighbor policy. If you're renting the house, now we have a student who's rented 4 houses to do this. So you don't have to own the house, but if you rent the house, you have approval from the landlord. There's about 36 checkoffs that need to happen, and each state may have a little bit different way that they want to see those documents. And it's a packet of documents, and you give it to your state affiliate. state affiliate inspects the home, looks at your documents, and they basically give you the state approval.
And can one go to, using the drug court as an example, call there and find out what the reimbursement amount might be, assuming that they have an accredited house that they can offer transitional housing for? I mean, can you just call and quickly find out what that number is?
That's a great question, because we are getting $850 per bed, for 32 beds. Oh, no, in Washington, but Florida's rates are not that far off. I was looking yesterday and saw some of your regular sober homes are at $750 a bed. Mm-hmm. So that's $1,500 a bedroom for a 4-bedroom home. Wow. Yeah, you're getting.
What other types of ancillary programs do you have to offer? I'm assuming so. As part of this, as part of that fee living there, like you guys have to handle the lawn care, the maintenance of the home, probably all the utilities, right? That's your responsibility. Right. But outside of just the general, the operational costs, I guess you could call it, of the house itself, are there any other ancillary programs that you offer? Do you have to bring in specialists as part of the budget to give talks or therapy sessions, what have you? Or is that something that the actual state or local government handles?
We only take people who are in programs that we're not involved with. We're just landlords.
So they might leave the house and go to whatever the required, therapy session might be that given day or that given week. And then they're just using your home as a place to rest their head.
Right.
And okay, got it.
Perfect. You got it.
And they're single family homes. And the first 3 we paid probably about $350,000-$400,000 for, and now they're almost double in value. And, we're getting double to triple cash flow each month. So basically mortgages, equity is going in, mortgages are paid, utilities are paid. We have enough to pay people a small stipend to keep this going or to have reduced rents, and make a cash flow too, and expand. The Seattle market right now is a little bit crazy, so we've decided not to purchase there right now. And, Florida looks inexpensive in comparison.
And compared to Seattle, yeah, I'm sure. Which is funny because, the prices here have just, risen astronomically over the past couple of years. But, compared to Seattle, it seems relatively inexpensive.
It does, what we like the most, we've served about 500 people in the last 5 years. And we do have a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. We built it by doing recovery homes and housing people and vets, and actually have a household of golden girls, women in their 50s who have nowhere else to go and they're living on SSI. So we have what I call the people who are just underserved. They don't need a lot. They're independent. They're working. They're self-sufficient. And they live in a beautiful home together, and they've built this community. And what we look at is, wow, because we put people in great homes, the alternative may have been that they wouldn't be successful. Mm-hmm. And, it's really great to have this knowledge that housing changed everything.
Mm-hmm. So the operation side of the house, I'm trying to figure out, we typically have, when we're just running a back of the napkin, we're looking at a mobile home park to purchase or some other type of commercial real estate. We normally have like a back of the napkin, quick rough math formula that we can use to determine, potential gross income, potential expenses, operational expenses, and then ultimately where might we end up with our NOI? What potential does this property have to produce? And then ultimately be back into, what can I realistically pay for it in order to have this model make sense? Now that you're down in Florida, what are you finding as far as what is the price point that you're seeking in order to have this economically make sense? Is there $500,000-$600,000 price range for the size?
I'd like to point out that a year ago, last January, we purchased the last house that we bought, $530,000.
Right.
And you know what? We made that thing cash flow because our whole philosophy is different. Because we know the cash flow is good, we go out and get the houses that have curb appeal that we really want. Yeah. We never have to. We never have to compromise and lowball. We'll pay retail price.
But I think in Florida, if you're getting $700 a person or $650 a person, which is what I was seeing online yesterday, and you're grossing $5,000 to $6,000 a month, you could, whatever, a $400,000 house would be reasonable. So what's that house payment going to be? It's going to be less than $2,000 a month.
Because remember, especially like in the state of Washington, our plan is to also go to Spokane because those government contracts, they don't change. It's the same price. It's the same price in Seattle as it is for a $530,000 house as it is a $240,000 house in Spokane. And those are beautiful homes.
Yeah.
And plus we're rehabbers too. We've gone in there with sledgehammers. We kind of blew it on the first house, but we got better as time went on. And so, we can look at a house and see the potential. If we see something with 2 bathrooms, 2.5 baths, 3 bedrooms, we even know how to take a family room and convert that into additional bed space. And we're really into having a good community kitchen. And so we own that real estate, and we only want to buy real estate that we want to own.
Yes.
And, typically from what we're seeing right now where we're at is you do have bus lines, you do have public transportation. And, the one thing about our people is they're all working. Every person is working. We're not trying to take that person that is not in recovery, that person who may have been homeless last week. That's not our clientele. We're taking that person who may have a little bit of a checkered credit background, may not have a perfect record, but they're striving to do better. And that is the majority of human beings.
Yeah.
They want to do better.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you deal with the NIMBY syndrome, the not in my backyard, right? I'm sure that's a big one, right? Ultimately, there's probably a great deal of pushback if a neighbor finds out, who this new buyer might be and what they intend to do. How you guys address that?
This is probably what we're most proud of because it's critical. It is critical that you're accepted in your neighborhood. So the first thing we tell our contractors who are rehabbing our house, don't talk to the neighbors. Second of all, after you get it built, you don't bring 8 or 10 people in overnight. You sprinkle them in. But word will get out and they'll approach you and you look them in the eye and insist, because remember, we believe in the 70% rule. 70% of everyone everywhere has someone they love and care about who's struggling with addiction. So 70% of our neighbors are empathetic to what we're trying to do. And they also know this is America's biggest problem. And they love contributing because remember, our lawns are as nice as can be. We rehab the house so it increases the value of the neighborhood. We don't allow any visitors coming and going.
Yeah.
If you want a relationship, you go down the street, you go somewhere else. We're serious about this. And then after a while, most of our neighbors just wave and actually develop relationships because guess what? They're helping solve America's biggest problem without the consequence of one of those kind of houses that, what I'm talking about, 3 or 4 broken down cars. And, I don't want to talk, God bless anyone who houses people. So I don't want to be, holier than thou. But really, and after 5 years and we have 6 houses, just the slightest bit of pushback occasionally. And as long as they can look over their fence and say, they're no different than we are. Yeah. And I tell every one of our residents, the only reason we are in this beautiful, safe neighborhood is because our neighbors allow us to be here. And when the day comes where if we're not wanted, thank goodness we have a house that's ready to sell tomorrow. And we would do that. But we've never had to pull that trigger.
And we became experts on fair housing. I'm a biotech scientist, but I also practice patent law in tech companies. And so we actually know fair housing law, and disability, addiction is considered a disability, so we're allowed to be there. But what has protected us in the last year during the eviction moratoriums, that fair housing law also looks at what we're doing as a program. And so if somebody is failing in our home, we are allowed to ask them to rehome themselves or find a different place to live. So we don't have that issue of people staying permanently if they're not following the rules. So fair housing has been our really good friend for this entire time.
Okay. Good deal. Do you have a lot of personality conflicts, with folks sharing bedrooms or?
Yeah.
I want to share this one. Before my long career in international marketing, guess what? I was an executive director of a camp. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And I got really good at, I got to make sure the water runs. And if Nancy goes home and says, I didn't like camp because the water was cold, Nancy's not coming back, and sometimes you have conflicts within the cabin, and Bobby and Johnny don't get along. I say, Bobby, come here. I want to show you, look at the view from this cabin. Isn't that a better, nicer house? And so that's what we do. We have so many houses and so many options that we will move people around to different houses. And that strategy works real well for us.
And we let people pick their own roommates, and we do a lot of referrals. Who are your friends that you want to move in? Nobody will move somebody they don't like into their home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, good point. Good point. What is the biggest challenge of scaling out this model? You guys you're at 6 homes right now.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest challenge as you start here in Florida, as you look for your first home here in Florida? And I don't know what your ultimate long-term goal is, whether it's 5 more homes or 2 more homes or 50 more homes. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But for the individual, whether it's you or one of your students that wants to build a portfolio of these houses and have this be the model that they want to follow, what are the bigger challenges of actually scaling this out?
Well, for us, it was just financial, getting those down payments together, because we're buying $500,000 and $600,000 homes. Mm-hmm. And this wasn't our only real estate. We had a foray into Airbnbs too, on top of this. So, this became the most lucrative and the easiest to manage, particularly during the past year. I would say if you want to scale this appropriately, is do what we're always doing, which is trying to find the talent in the house to manage it. And so even every time we open up a house, somebody is always volunteering to be the house leader or the house manager, and then putting an assistant in place. And, as long as you have the eyes in the house, there's no challenges. We have a friend who's a single woman who owns 15 homes, and she has those homes filled to the brim because that's her philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. What are some of the other important criteria you look for? Nice neighborhood, nice home, nice yard. What are some of the other bus lines? So that's critical. Anything else that's of vital importance that would make you say yay to this house or nay to this one?
We like a corner lot. We do like off-street parking. In Washington, we have a lot of 2-story homes, so we can essentially put 4 people down and 4 people up. So your people don't feel crowded. Here in Florida, we've got kind of these single-story homes that are split. And again, just, having private areas for people and community areas is really important. And we're real estate investors. I mean, at the end of the day, we're really good at what we do with helping people, but we want homes that are going to appreciate. We're looking at those homes that has a pawn shop in one end of the neighborhood and waterfront on the other. And if we see that, we're like, oh, this is our fishing hole.
Nothing better than a Starbucks coffee shop. And we also don't like being a cul-de-sac, where you're kind of in a fishbowl. Ideally, if you're on a arterial that's about 25, 35 miles an hour, people just pass you by. We always have American flags flying out in front to honor my dad, who was a Vietnam veteran. Mm-hmm. And mainly you just want to just blend in with the scenery. Yeah. Blend in with the scenery.
In fact, the home we're in right now, I really love, but when we bought it online, we thought it may be our first case house in Florida.
That's funny. Yeah, bought it sight unseen, right?
We've done that a half a dozen times.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, there's no way my wife would go for that at all. So everything sounds great. So you guys are doing a wonderful deed for society. You're helping a lot of folks get back on their feet. On the flip side of that, you're making cash flow. You're basically taking a home that otherwise wouldn't cash flow in a traditional rental model and making it cash flow and, being able to hold on to it for the long term, hopefully paying down your principal balance on that mortgage and build equity in that asset that ultimately will turn hopefully at some point into something you tap into for retirement or can sell off. But long-term strategy is basically build equity, have a sustainable business model that can make money and helps a lot of people. What are the downsides? Because I feel like we've only talked about the positives. What are the downsides outside of like the normal things like personality conflicts and things of that nature? But like, what are the risks associated with this business model, what are the other negatives that might be associated with it?
I think one of the biggest ones is we decided early on that we were going to work only with meth and heroin addicts. And that is the hardest population to serve. And we have to worry, is somebody going to leave an overdose? So we have dealt with that knowledge that when we jumped into this, we were going to work with those young adults whose parents have walked away from them, because many of our people are 25 to 35 and they're alone and they have this addiction, but they're trying to beat it. And how do we serve that? And we know a lot of people who aren't doing what we're doing. They're having sober homes because people have other types of addiction, or they have alcohol addiction. They're not the ones that can cause you to end up in a hospital ICU bed. And so that is a downside. And that being the case, even though we have dealt with this most challenging issue in America, which is opioid addiction, we're seeing people live with us long enough to be cured. Yeah. And they're walking away from it. But, it's something to think about when you're deciding to do a community home. You have to do what you feel you can deal with your life experience. Mm-hmm. And because I have that hardened doctorate in understand opioids, I felt like we were best suited to help the people who were in the greatest need. Yeah. And I think the other piece too is sometimes it breaks our heart to get some of these older people in. We have people over 70 with families and they're not addicted. We have 3 Vietnam vets this past summer and they had nowhere to go, even though they have family. So, I think some of the heart-wrenching things that you deal with, you just have to realize you're providing housing, you're providing community. And I think from day one, we realized that a lot of people didn't really know how to live together in a house because they hadn't had one growing up, or they had a dysfunctional family growing up. We've taken a lot of foster kids aged out of the system. And early on, we took in 2 18-year-old girls who had lost their parents at the age of 13, and they were on the streets, and they ended up incarcerated. So when we look at the tragedies that people have gone through, you have to be sensitive to it, but then you have to realize you are providing home for the first time, and you're providing a basis for people to launch into a wonderful life.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and thank you guys for what you do. It's absolutely amazing. I can tell that your hearts are deeply rooted to it, which is, first and foremost. If that didn't exist, it might be a profitable business model, but it ultimately wouldn't be what it is today. So again, I think that I'm assuming you probably spread that very similar word to your students that are thinking about getting into any of these various different spaces of shared or group housing, correct? If their heart's not into it, it can't just be about the dollar signs. They've got to be deeply rooted in the cause and have a sincere, sincere desire to help those that they're going to be serving.
Well said. Well said.
It is well said. And people want meaning in their life. If 2020 showed us anything, is life is fragile. The unexpected happens. And where do you fit in this whole scheme? And but they also need to make a living. We watched in 2020 whole industries disappearing. Yeah. And, how do you support yourself when you don't have control over that and do well?
Yeah. Are there any regulatory risks associated with these various business models, i.e. funding going away? Has there been anything as historically that's played out over the decades? And I know it's probably state by state specific, but to where, funding gets pulled for some of these incredibly important programs?
Well, it does. And a lot of people lose their funding after a few months, but they have a wonderful place to live. And so we keep their debit credit cards on file with our accountant, and they self-pay to continue to live there in their shared room. So we have people who've been self-paying for years. And
so in situations where maybe the local municipality or government isn't going to guarantee for 2 years or 3 years payment, it might last a couple of months, but ultimately they can make their own decision to continue on, but self-pay.
Well, and we've tapped into a lot of charities. United Way will make huge gifts to municipalities to deploy towards housing. And we get those dollars because we have superior housing.
Got it.
Same thing with YWCA, the veterans groups.
Urban League. That's one of our tricks. Anytime we have an agency that could provide our residents with some help for their payment, we invite them to tour our houses because they are so used to seeing houses that
they're substandard.
Okay, substandard. I'm being nice. But the key is you come in and you meet our residents. You look at the house. It's beautiful. It's absolutely spotless. People love being there, and they love helping Frank and Sherri, our residents, and they'll write a check almost any time they're asked because, I'm a little short this month, or I had to pay one of my tickets that I
lost a job.
Or I lost a job.
Yeah. Got it. Well, guys, this is absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on here. I was excited to have you on the show. And as I told you before we started recording, I'm very much into niches and love kind of taking the contrarian point of view and adding the element, which we've just talked about here, which is actually truly helping folks. You're providing just a necessary means of housing for those that otherwise would be stuck in some of those less desirable, again, nice way to put it, homes that we've all probably seen out there, right? And which is probably one of the big reasons why, there's such a high attrition rate in those various transitional housing programs. So again, thank you for guys what you've done and what you put together here. And I know that you also teach about this. You have different resources available. So maybe tell our listeners, for those that want to learn more about what you have going on, how they can reach you and find out more about what you have going on.
Well, two ways. We use our casehousefoundation.org website as an educational site. We've got videos on there, and it also has a link to sharedhousingacademy.com. We partnered up with Gene Guarino's group to teach our niche, and he's been so generous and kind to introduce us to people like you, Kevin. Thank you so much. Yeah. And to give us a boost. Because he believes in what we're doing. And so we have a 1-hour class that we teach frequently to give people an overview of how to do this. When we teach a 3-day class, we take them through the accreditation standards, fair housing law, good neighbor policy, and because we're real estate people, even how to take the real estate you already own and repurpose it in this way so you don't get stuck with eviction moratoriums and you can do well. So, those are basically how we're getting out there.
Okay, fantastic. Well, guys, thank you again for joining us. It's been a lot of fun having you here, and looking forward to meet up with you in person now that you're in my backyard. So we'll have to grab a coffee or lunch together at some point in time in the future. But with that, appreciate all you're doing and wish you all the best here in the future, okay?
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Alrighty, guys, that's all we have for this week's show. So until we meet again next week, this is your host, Kevin Bupp, wishing you huge success. You take care.
Congratulations! Now you've got more of the best tricks of the trade in building massive amounts of passive income from real estate. For more amazing resources, visit realestateinvestingforcashflow.com, and we'll see you next Monday morning.